Please be advised, this video includes spoilers for Final Fantasy XIV through the main story quest, Endwalker. What would happen if two of the greatest fighters in Final Fantasy XIV met on the battlefield? There's no doubt we've experienced many memorable fights in the game's story so far. But what about battles that never happened? Let's speculate on who would win if Estinien, the Azure Dragoon, fought Gaius, the Shadow Hunter. Before we begin, let's lay out some guidelines. The conclusions in this video are my opinion. I'll base that on the game's lore and other official information. However, there will be some speculation because of the nature of this question. We're considering this battle to be a one-on-one encounter. No allies may assist either fighter in this hypothetical situation. Gaius and Estinien both have some of the most impressive resumes of mortal fighters. Each have long careers with a great amount of training and combat experience. Because of this, I don't think it would be fair to examine the question of who would win at just one point in time. Instead, I want to examine this fight at 5 points in history, during A Realm Reborn, Heavensward, Stormblood, Shadowbringers, and Endwalker. Estinien Varlano is the most recent Azure Dragoon and a longtime defender of Ishgard. Sir Albric Bale took him in as a boy. Bale is a former Azure Dragoon himself, meaning he has great skill with a lance. He trained the young Estinien as a Dragoon to succeed him. Estinien later served in the Temple Knights alongside Emmerich de Borel for many years. This leads to him taking the Azure Dragoon mantle. His skill at hunting dragons earned him the moniker of Wormblood. Every Dragoon starts out as a Lancer, so we can assume Estinien did the same. Ywain tells us that Lancers use an incredibly offensive style of fighting. Their objective is to use any means necessary to pierce an opponent's defense with their lance. Dragoons take it a step further and become proficient in aerial combat. It's established through the Dragoon job quests in A Realm Reborn that Estinien is the most skilled Dragoon alive, aside from the Warrior of Light if that's the job you choose. Not to mention that Estinien wields an artifact of great power at this time, one of Nidhogg's eyes. This gives the user access to Draconic Ether. The Encyclopedia of Eorzea Volume 1 refers to this technique as Blood of the Dragon. Nidhogg's eye is essentially the focusing iris for that power. It's enough to pin Nidhogg down in the Eyrie and serve as a battering ram to break down the Allagan barrier around Aziz Law. Now, while the eye does offer great power, it also allows Nidhogg to influence him if his emotions are not kept in check. We see this happen during his duel with the Warrior of Light in the level 50 Dragoon quest, Into the Dragon's Maw. Speaking of that duel, Estinien uses standard Dragoon abilities, but he also possesses the unique skill Sky Dragon Dive that leaves a ring of fire in its wake. The warrior wins this duel, although it is cut short when Nidhogg's presence begins to corrupt Estinien, the Dragoon saying he could win with more power. Luckily, the spirit of Haldreth, the first Azure Dragoon, intervenes and helps Estinien return to his senses. This is important to note because we're going to use the warrior's strength as a measurement against our two combatants. Estinien also participates in the defense of Ishgard when the Dravanian horde attacks. He slays many dragons during this event. Gaius Balsar is the former legatus of the Garlean Empire and a feared leader, serving as one of the generals leading the invasion of Eorzea. His talents earned him the rank of legatus and the title of Black Wolf. Cid's father gifted Gaius with his signature gunblade, Airsbane. It's important to note that Imperial gunblades and the ones used by the Gunbreaker class function differently. Their Imperial version just allows for the firing of bullets, while the Gunbreaker models utilize etherically charged cartridges. Though we do see Gaius use his gunblade to fire blade beams using the Terminus Est technique. That's one of Gaius's signature moves. Because of this distinction, we can't exactly characterize Gaius as a gunbreaker. There's a big difference in their skill sets. Gaius is a Garlean native, which comes with limitations. Most Garleans lack the ability to use magic because they can't naturally manipulate ether as the other races can. The Empire makes up for this by developing Magitech, machines powered by ceruleum fuel. This technology allowed the Empire to conquer parts of the modern world. Gaius is well versed in its use, and that includes his armor. The left gauntlet of his armor is bulkier and has a visible barrel. The arm cannon, called the Hand of the Empire, fires blue cerulean blast that can kill an Ixal in one shot. We get our first glimpse of his skills in battle during the 1.0 story. He intercepts a group of Alamegan resistance members and kills all of them when they try to steal an airship. He also attempted to kill the adventurer, but he's stopped by Ida, Papalymo, Thancred, and Y'shtola, 4 founding members of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. But even though he's outnumbered, Gaius easily forces them on the defensive before ending the fight by calling for gunfire from an Imperial dreadnought. Gaius also confronts the Warrior of Light in the Praetorium duty. Originally, the warrior brings 7 other adventurers with them during this duty, and the entire group faces Gaius. This was changed in 6.1 to a 4-player duty, but the description of Praetorium still states you and your comrades, so as far as we know, the warrior needed help to defeat Gaius. The first fight is when Gaius's armor changes from its signature black to a brighter gold. We don't know the specifics of this form, but the Gilded Magitech mount does give us a clue to its deeper benefit. The description for this mount says Garleans used gold plating for better resistance against magic. Gaius uses several unique abilities during this fight, most utilizing his gunblade. He also shows the ability to create phantoms of himself. The second fight is against the Ultima weapon, an anti-primal Allagan creation. Gaius pilots this machine himself. Now the warrior and his comrades manage to defeat the weapon with Hydaelyn's aid. Gaius is eventually removed from Ultima weapon after losing in a 3rd confrontation. So who would win if Estinien and Gaius fought during A Realm Reborn? Both are skilled fighters at this point and are a cut above their peers. Estinien possesses great mobility and power, especially when you factor in Nidhogg's Eye. But the warrior won their duel against Estinien. The warrior needed help of other adventurers to face Gaius. So when you compare their feats at this stage of the story, it's clear to me that Gaius has the upper hand. He is as much of a ranged fighter as he is in close combat. All of Estinien's aerial maneuvers would put him at the mercy of the Black Wolf's firepower. It would be a good fight, no doubt, but the Legatus has the advantage. And that's not even factoring in Ultima weapon. If Gaius were to pilot it, which I think would be a bit unfair, Estinien would have an even tougher time. Maybe the eye could do some damage to it, but he'd likely succumb to Nidhogg's influence at the cost of immobilizing the machine. The winner at this time is Gaius. Estinien sees a great deal of development in Heavensward, and not just from a story perspective. He's now a trusted ally to Alphinaud, the Warrior of Light, Izel, and the Ishgardians. Estinien travels with the warrior to slay the great worm Nidhogg. He uses the dragon's own eye against him, showing greater resistance to the worm's influence than before. Estinien also shows great strength and acrobatic ability when he slays the dragon and coats his armor with the worm's blood. Estinien claims a second dragon eye here, but it's not actually Nidhogg's. It belongs to his brother, Hrace-Velgar. The party returns that eye to him. But Estinien would come to possess both eyes. He uses the ether from the first eye as a battering ram to break the barrier around Aziz's Law. Allagan technology was unparalleled, even thousands of years after the civilization's demise. The fact that Estinien could break these defenses is quite the feat. He briefly parts with that eye so the warrior could use it to do what they do best, putting down Ascians. And since we're using the warrior as a measuring stick, it's important to disclose how much more powerful they are at this point in the story. The warrior takes on 2 Ascians, the entire Heavensward, and King Thordan on their own, and wins every single fight. So when Estinien becomes possessed by Nidhogg's shade from both of the worm's eyes, the Dragoon becomes a much greater threat. He interrupts the peace ceremony and impales Vidofnir, one of Hrace-Velgar's brood. This didn't kill the dragon, but Estinien was holding back. It takes a group effort by the warrior, Alphinaud, the Ishgardian forces, Hrace-Velgar, and even the spirits of allies killed to stop the possessed Dragoon at the end of the expansion. Nidhogg's eyes are removed and thrown from the bridge, and Estinien eventually makes a full recovery. Gaius's growth is difficult to gauge during this period. We don't encounter him in the story, but we eventually find out where he's been. So we'll come back to this era of the matchup after we talk about Stormblood. This is when Gaius makes his return. He abandoned his rank with the Garlean Empire. You can see he no longer wears that judge-style armor. He does still have Airsbane though. Gaius's mission now is hunting the Ascians. They are the ones responsible for the manipulation of his homeland, and he won't stop until all of these dark mages are dead. Gaius must be pretty skilled at slaying them because he wears several Ascian masks as prizes. The black ones indicate lesser Ascians, but the red ones are from Convocation members, a much more powerful breed of Ascian. The Sundered Ascians, like the ones Gaius killed, have several tricky abilities. They can travel through the rift to other dimensions, and possess mortal bodies to interact with the physical world. They are also pretty difficult to destroy because their souls can escape to the rift if their body is killed. The only way to permanently destroy them is by trapping their ether like with white auracite. These masks are a testament to how intelligent and deadly Gaius is. He can't manipulate ether, so magic is lost to him, but the man is still clearly capable. Naoki Yoshida, the director of the game, did clarify in a live letter that Gaius probably doesn't know that Ascians need to have their ether trapped to be permanently destroyed. But even so, these masks mean that Gaius still won, and he won a lot. Estinien spends his time in Stormblood hunting Shinryu, the primal created by Nidhogg's Eyes. One of his greatest feats to date is single-handedly destroying the main cannon at Castrum Abania, allowing the Alliance forces to infiltrate. Estinien later destroys Nidhogg's Eyes to ensure no man or dragon ever misuses their power again. However, during the final Dragoon job quest of Stormblood, he explains that his possession and subsequent freedom from Nidhogg has taught him to safely harness the power of the dragon within him. He was also involved in the war between the Eorzean Alliance and the Garlean Empire. The Dragoon interrupts a battle between the Warrior of Light and the Ascian Elidibus, who is using Xenos' body. The warrior collapses because the Crystal Exarch is reaching out to them from the first. Elidibus moves in for the kill, but Estinien jumps in. As great of a fight as this would be to see, Elidibus is called away. Now Xenos is an extraordinarily powerful individual, second only to the warrior when it comes to mortals. Some characters knew at this time that Elidibus was using Xenos' body, but it's possible Estinien did not, as he wasn't directly involved in those developments in-game. But Estinien still has the confidence to confront this very powerful foe. And this is moments after several key members of the Alliance are beaten by the possessed Xenos. Even though a full fight didn't happen, I believe we can use this as a gauge for Estinien's combat abilities growing, especially considering that the power of Nidhogg's Eyes weren't entirely lost to him. So who wins during Heavensward? Well, given Gaius' setbacks after abandoning the Empire and Estinien's boost in power from Nidhogg's second eye, I have to give this one to the Dragoon. It would be an even greater struggle for Gaius if Estinien fell to Nidhogg's influence. Estinien's fighting style would be able to overwhelm Gaius, who can't hide behind his advanced armor anymore. The fight would be a little closer during Stormblood since Nidhogg's Eyes are gone, but Estinien is still the winner. Shadowbringers gives both of these fighters some time to shine, especially together. The two investigate the Black Rose developments in the Garlean Empire and temporarily join forces. The player takes control of Estinien during the solo duty Vows of Virtue, Deeds of Cruelty. And this is another confirmation that a portion of Nidhogg's power is still within Estinien. He fights Arch Ultima, an upgraded version of Ultima weapon. You'll remember it took the Warrior of Light, his allies, and Heidelin's intervention to beat the original. During this fight, Estinien is permanently under an effect called Shadow of the Dragon. This gives him access to some of Nidhogg's abilities. His limit break is called Dragon Shadow Dive, which he uses to finish off Arch Ultima on his own. Now before this fight, Gaius and Estinien both confront a restored Xenos in the throne room. The two try their best, but as I said before, Xenos is one of the most powerful people in Final Fantasy XIV. He deflects the pair's most powerful attacks, and it's clear they never really stood a chance against him. The fight is interrupted by other Garlean forces. Gaius is also a central character to the Trial series in Shadowbringers. While we do know he was injured by Ruby Weapon protecting an ally, he does demonstrate growth in skill. He shows mastery over his weapon when confronting Valens. The man thought that Gaius stood no chance because he had all of the former Legatus's combat data, but the Shadowhunter uses a technique his opponent had never seen before. Terminus est Crossium Mors. It's powerful enough to mortally wound Valens in a single strike. Estinien officially joins the Scions towards the end of Shadowbringers and stays on the front lines. He rides on Tiamat to clear a path for the warrior to reach Lunar Bahamut. He also assists against the other lunar primals in the final Shadowbringers patch. So who wins if these two fought during Shadowbringers? Gaius continues to be a formidable foe that not many could contest. The problem is that Estinien continues to show incredible feats of strength. The Dragoon would definitely win at this stage of the story as well. Gaius is mostly absent in Endwalker. He chooses to guard Werlet from the blasphemies of the final days, and that's about it. If he makes any notable leaps in skill, it happens off screen, and we don't really have a frame of reference for it. Estinien, on the other hand, becomes a trust member and a heavily featured member of the story again. This gives us opportunities to see his strength firsthand. He rides Vitra to cull the number of blasphemies near Radzat-Han. He leads the offensive on the Tower of Zot. But Estinien's most notable feat at this time happens just before the final fight with the Endsinger. In this cutscene, the Endsinger creates and launches a planetoid at Estinien while he attempts to jump toward her. Now, while this does knock him out of the fight, it leaves no permanent damage or really any worse for wear for Estinien. Thancred manages a similar feat, but he had a magical barrier courtesy of Urianger, while Estinien did not. We're not finished with Endwalker as a whole, but it's safe to say that Estinien outclasses Gaius in single combat. His journey has made him one of the deadliest fighters on the star, close to a force of nature in his own right. Gaius is unfortunately limited by technology, which he discards much of when he leads the Empire. His skills with the blade are incredible, and he's a natural leader, but Estinien's growth in power from his experience with Nidhogg means he would definitely win this fight. And that's how I think battles between these two would end. Who do you think is the better fighter, Gaius or Estinien? Let me know in the comments below. Also, subscribe so you know when the next lore video for Final Fantasy XIV comes out. And if you enjoyed this what if versus video, throw me some suggestions in the comments as well. Take care, warriors, and I'll see you next time.